Okay, I believe we have started this meeting officially. So, hey, happy Friday. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Leah McGrath, and I serve as the Executive Director of GovRAMP. And today I am joined by a few of my colleagues you've heard from many times before. They're fantastic. Jessica's actually going to be hopping on for the latter half of this conversation, but we have David and Alan here for the duration. So David serves as our PMO, our Senior PMO Director, and Alan works with our PMO as well. And if you've been a part of these calls or any of our committees, you know Alan and David are just so integral in providing their expertise along the way. So thank you for taking time to be with us today. We are going to be walking through a few updates, and we'll just hop right in. We're going to talk a little bit, as we have been doing since we started these. When was it, David? In April, I think,
Yes.
was our first working session. So as you know, if you've been with us, we have held monthly working sessions, and then actually the last time we met was in July. We took August off and are really pivoting to more of bi-monthly working sessions for a little bit and see how that goes, to give a little more time for some of the changes and updates and for our work to continue as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about what has happened, try to report out to you some of the happenings that we are following related to FedRAMP, and then also spend a little bit of time giving you some updates in terms of what's in our roadmap as well. Anything else, David or Alan?
No, it's a packed session.
It is. So we will go ahead and begin. You probably have noticed we do have a number of participants in the call. So for that reason, you are entering the meeting muted, but we do encourage you and invite you to use that chat feature. I'll try to monitor it. If I've missed anything, please, anyone feel free to speak up. David, Alan, if you see something that I've missed, we will try to address any comments or questions and really invite you to be a part of this discussion as well. We know many of you are following all of these activities, and we really like to hear your feedback and thoughts. So a couple of updates, latest happenings. Been a busy couple of months. So a couple of things that just big picture as we look at what's happening with FedRAMP. Again, we are linking to this, so we always encourage you to go to fedramp.gov and follow along. This is just kind of our service to try to help what's happening, but there is a public roadmap that you can click on. It's in GitHub. We have a link there. You can find it on fedramp.gov, and it's fantastic. You can click in and see the notes that are added, comments that are added, links to draft documents or final documents are there as well. And so that's a really nice resource for you. As it relates to the 20X initiative that has been underway for the last few months, there have been a couple milestones. David, Alan, what has happened with phase 1 and phase 2?
Well, starting with phase 1, they've completed the phase 1 pilot.
There you go.
So there were 26 submissions sent in to FedRAMP, and as of yesterday, there were 8 listed on the FedRAMP marketplace with a 20X low authorization.
That's right. And the distinction is that phase 1 was really focused on the low impact baseline,
correct.
Right?
Yes, yep. Exclusively on the low impact. So we're not exactly sure where the other 18 lie right now, if they're in process or if they've abandoned. But obviously over time, we expect that number to change.
Yeah, and I think one of the interesting things too will be to continue to learn. I mean, this is a pilot, and we really appreciate the transparency of the entire process so that we can understand what's working, what's not, and where is this going to iterate to. So we'll be following along as we continue to learn more, and following along too next week. So next Wednesday afternoon, there is an announcement that the Alliance for Digital Innovation is hosting the FedRAMP leadership, who will be really talking about phase 2. And phase 2 is going to focus on moderate impact level. So that's something, certainly what we see most commonly in our program is at that moderate impact level. So that's something that we'll be paying extra attention to as well. In other news, big picture, these were kind of big items we thought were worth highlighting. The AI prioritization, there was, as you know, as many probably are aware, there is a big push with the current administration and leadership to really drive toward AI adoption. So there was a memo from the FedRAMP office prioritizing AI as well. And that makes sense. That does, kind of align with the bigger initiatives of the administration. The other document is a scope of FedRAMP. And this is a document that was released in August. And it's a newer, it's maybe more defined scope from prior memos and publications that's really intended to help advise agencies. It's directed to the government agencies in terms of defining when is FedRAMP in scope. And David and Ellen, I thought this was an interesting document because this is a conversation we have quite often with our participating governments too.
Absolutely.
So we are one of the things on our roadmap, and we're going to talk more about our full roadmap at our summit, October 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, so in a couple weeks in Chicago. But one of the things on our roadmap is to look at our data classification guidance that somewhat aligns with this scope of FedRAMP. And so I'm looking forward to digging in a little bit more and seeing if there are some nuggets that might be transferable as we work on developing those continued kind of best practice guidance documents for our participating governments. So that was of interest to me. I don't know, Alan or David, if you saw anything else in the AI or scope of FedRAMP documents that would be helpful to pull out.
I think the biggest thing that was in there to my eyes was, where is FedRAMP applicable?
Right.
Who should be using it? Who shouldn't be using it as well? So
yeah, that's a great point, because the scope of FedRAMP is really specific to federal agencies. And we actually have had that question quite often from our states, local governments, education organizations. And so the scope is very specific as written. It's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on. This is kind of our running tally. You can also go, if you go to fedramp.gov, one of the things that I actually really appreciate, I love this, is the change log. That's a newer feature this year, and you can go and see all the different things. It's just their log of changes, whether it's a published blog or comments open, closed. And so that's kind of a nice view. Tried to sort these in terms of what impacts Rev 5, what impacts 20X, the pilot program, which is 20X. And then, as you can see by the asterisk, there are a few that apply to both. And so that's part of how they're trying to balance some of these updates. In looking at these and looking at the updated documentation, I guess starting with you, David and Alan, anything stand out to you that you're kind of thinking about after the review?
Yeah, I think it was on our last meeting where we talked about the significant change notification standard and how much I loved that they've clarified a lot of things with that significant change notification. And spoiler alert, we're going to talk about it a little bit later here, because GovRAMP has some really cool things coming regarding that.
Absolutely.
I don't want to give it away yet.
Yep, David got my answer, so.
We do have a question. I'd really love to hear what the working group has to say on the now closed boundary protection.
Yeah, so the boundary protection guidance, in some ways, I think got even more vague than what the legacy boundary guidance has. In other areas, got a little bit more specific. It was more about the mindset to be in when defining the boundary than some hard, fast rules. So it's honestly a mixed bag.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is always difficult when defining the boundary is thinking about how it's going to be used, right? And so if you're, working with the way that it seems, if you're working with one agency, they may define the boundary differently or want it defined differently than another agency. And so trying to kind of have the foresight to
Right.
figure out where the boundary lies. We get it. It's a challenge.
Yeah.
I mean,
but
what advice do you have, David, to that end?
Well, the sentiment that I read, at least in the boundary protection balance improvement, is a mentality of follow the data. Wherever the
Yes.
data is,
Yes,
that's
that's
in
good.
scope. And when you get into that mindset, the rest of the document makes a lot more sense and becomes more concrete. But it takes 2-3 reads to get there, through there of this is where you should go. You know, figure out I'm moving from within my boundary to another FedRAMP or GovRAMP authorized service. What am I actually shipping there? Is it data per se, or is it something else? Has it been scrubbed? Has it not? Make sure that you're absolutely aware of what you're connecting to. Is that in scope or not for assessment? Because it may already have an assessment, then you can inherit things from it. It makes a lot more sense when you just realize it's about following the data. Alan?
Oh, it sounds good. Yeah, definitely about the data. The only other closed RFC here that I would really make sure people, look into and understand is the vulnerability detection and response standard. There was some changes there. It's been a lot of communication back and forth between Pete himself and a lot of service providers. So too much to detail on the call here, but definitely something to pay attention to.
Certainly. And I think the other thing, and this will be interesting, something I'm looking at or will be looking for as the first pilot continues, are those 20X phase 1 KSIs. That was a document that initially, when it was published, did list the related NIST controls. Then another publication removed the related NIST controls. So thinking about how that evolves, where that goes, we certainly would be proponents of maintaining the NIST control association for mapping. It's how we're working toward, we're driving toward framework harmonization. So we don't want to create our own framework or create greater disharmony as a side effect. So really thinking about how do we continue mapping toward common terminology, common accountability. And so I think that's another thing from a KSI perspective we'll be looking for in the future.
Could not agree more.
I love when David agrees with me. So it's not always the case. No, it's wonderful. So thinking about what's open now, there are currently, as of about a half hour ago, I checked again, 4 open RFCs. And so the first one is for the phase 2. This is the moderate impact level pilot 20X. So when we say 20X, we're talking about the pilot program for moderate impact level KSIs, those key security indicators. So that is out there now. And this is really interesting. The comments close October 10th. So if you want to make comments formally, you'll need to do so by October 10th. But David, Allen, any quick thoughts on your initial read of the KSIs?
So as I read through the KSIs, I noticed a couple of things. One, there's been some updates to the KSIs from the low impact to moderate. Some things were withdrawn, some things were clarified the language, and other things were more or less consolidated. Going back to the comment you made regarding the mapping to the 853 controls, Leah, I did a quick grab all that mapping, drop it into Excel, deduplicated it, and it comes out to about 240 some control enhancements that are being mapped through there. Obviously, we still need to do some validation on those to make sure that we agree with those mappings and such. But assuming that they're like for like, that kind of moves the needle from 325 controls today with a FedRAMP moderate to 248.
Yep. I think that's really helpful insight. I know one of the questions we've received quite frequently in these types of calls has been, right now GovRAMP has a program that allows for that fast track if you have a RAR or a SAR for a FedRAMP. According to Rev 5, based on NIST 853, I'm going to say Rev 5, we have a fast track. So if you have your RAR or SAR completed for SAP, you can bring that right through our program without having to redo, the documentation or assess again. We've had the same question, will we have a fast track similarly for the 20X program? And what we've been saying very candidly is we don't know yet, right? Because we're still evaluating. And so one thing that is very, very helpful is to see that mapping. So David, thank you. That's really helpful to know kind of what does it look like? What are we achieving? What are we missing? And then really that's a question that we would be taking to our governing committees, to our participating government members, to be able to understand, does this meet their needs, and what questions would they have? So that's just kind of a next step, but really appreciate having kind of the mapping or the ability to map through the KSIs. The other, anything else on the KSIs before we move forward?
No.
I was going to say the other thing, David, I'm going to ask you in the next call. So David and Alan, be ready. Is one of the things I'd love is not only looking at that mapping, but how does that align with the MITRE ATT&CK framework and the risk protection values? So if we know that we've gone from 324 controls to 200 and now I forget what you said, 40. How does that align? Are we prioritizing what's included based on the higher risk protection values? And that would be of interest, I believe, to our committees who've really put value in that idea of data driving kind of decisions.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's an exercise we also need to do because, there are some of those controls within the current set that are low attack values. And
we may say it's okay. Yeah,
exactly. Yep. It's analysis we need to do.
Yep. All right. So you all heard it here in our next meeting when we regroup. Hopefully we'll be able to speak a little bit to that. It's something we've talked a lot about. Let's really focus our time on the things that have the greatest impact on security outcomes. So fully agree. Looking at the other open comments, RFC 15. Alan, tell us what this one's about.
Yeah, so this is an attempt to kind of get service providers to be more specific on what their customers need to be doing to meet essentially their end of the bargain to implement all the security controls. So there's already the CIS workbook and the CRM workbook. But this is kind of leading in more specifically to almost creating user guides specifically for your customers, service provider customers, on how to implement the correct security controls within that information system that they're providing.
Alan,
go on. David and I are probably going to say the same thing.
Yeah.
Go ahead, David.
I was going to say, in talking to some of the old timers within the former FedRAMP PMO, they tell me that was the intent with requiring user guides. But what was received more often than not was just a how to navigate through the system, not necessarily how to configure it well and securely. So I think this is an awesome thing to pivot towards.
Yeah.
Totally agree. I wanted to give applause here. And it's really, I was going to say, it's user guides intended for the government customers, right?
Yes.
So I wanted to make sure that was well understood. This is something, so if you participated, I'm going to ask Chandler, if he's on the line, to just drop in the link to our learning series. So earlier this month, we had a 3-day learning series where we talked a lot. In every session, it seems like we talked a lot about that shared responsibility. And one of the things we've been really trying to highlight from an education standpoint, thank you, Chandler, you can see you could download, but we referred in our education to our participating governments. We talk a lot about, hey, this is there, ask for the CIS, and that's the control implementation summary or the customer relationship or customer responsibility matrix.
Yeah.
Sorry, so many acronyms, but what that's going, this is it's a good starting point, right? To be able to have the conversation around what is, the provider's responsibility, and as a government user, what is your responsibility from a security control perspective? What happens if you implement it differently, right? And what vulnerabilities may exist as a result. And so I'm thrilled by this. I think this is a really good move.
And a shameless plug for the second in that learning series that Chandler just threw in. During the keynote, the speaker made a comment that I absolutely loved, and that is, the CIS workbook, the CRM workbook really tells you from a responsibility standpoint what responsibilities are mine, what responsibilities are yours, and what responsibility are ours. And I just really love the way he phrased that, because it really personalized the whole intent of those worksheets.
Oh, I do too. And from a provider standpoint, sometimes we'll be invited to talk to sales teams about what does it mean to be a part of the GovRAMP security program. And I always point these out, offer these out. You will be it helps drive that trusted conversation that is so, so critical. I love that, David. What's yours? What's mine? What's ours? So that we can secure it together. So I think that's fantastic. Really looking forward to seeing a little bit more around RFC 15 and those, I'm going to say, better user guides to help facilitate really that shared responsibility. So I'm excited for that. I think that's a great move. All right, the open comment, RFC 16. Alan, back to you, my friend.
Yeah, so this RFC kind of focuses more on the FedRAMP side of things and those service providers that have multiple agencies using their product. So obviously, back when FedRAMP first began, a lot of service providers had one agencies using their information system. Now today, many service providers have many agencies using their system, and it's well known that that's difficult to get all of those agencies together to collaborate in one meeting on the continuous monitoring documentation. So this RFC is put out to try and find ways to make that process easier for those service providers that have multiple agencies.
Yeah, and I would point out as well, if you're a service provider and you're currently doing collaborative ConMon, and we do this today with GovRAMP, invite us in with your agencies. So as you're doing ConMon with us and you're doing ConMon reviews with your government agencies at the federal level, invite us along with that so that we can hear the same thing and not be pestering you with questions as we're reviewing your ConMon. That's something we're doing today with a number of service providers, and welcome the opportunity to continue doing that and do more of it.
Absolutely. It's like the ultimate collab, right? And so know that David and his team are here for that. The other thing that I think has been helpful, we hope, and so we always want to hear more, is because we have our centralized PMO, and that also allows our providers to be able to give access to their government customers and state, local education as well. You get to decide from a provider, who are you giving access to your continuous monitoring, and is it at that elevated access or kind of high level executive summary access? But our hope is that process, and when we're talking about the collaborative calls, if David and his team or Alan are on those calls, all of that is what helps make kind of this centralized portal really work well, right? Because if there are questions or if there are triggers or notifications that need to be triggered to be able to tell our participating governments, hey, log in and take a look, all of that can happen in a really concerted effort. And so we continue to try to drive toward that assess once, report once, serve many concept before our participating governments really be on top of it as it relates to being able to kind of be an extension of their team from the continuous monitoring reporting. So no, I think this all makes sense. Thank you, Alan, for that description of the RFC. Okay, so, and then last but not least, the fourth open comment currently is RFC 17. Alan or David, do you want to speak a little bit? This one I think is a little more targeted to the pilot program 20X. But I'll give you the teaser. I like the vision.
Yeah. So the gist of this is more around what does an annual assessment look like? From the perspective of what needs to be assessed at what frequency, et cetera. One of the things that I saw in there when describing the moderate impact level for 20X is it's FRR PVA TF MO03 in their document. And it states providers must complete a persistent FedRAMP assessment at least once every 9 months, which one could read as the lifespan of your annual assessments, no longer annually, but rather every 9 months this cycles. So I think that's something to pay attention to. I suspect that there'll be a lot of comments coming on that particular component, if there's not already. But it's one to pay attention to, especially if you're thinking about 20X as a venue for your product, is knowing what that cycle will be. Leah, you're on mute.
Anything else to add to that, Alan?
No, not for me. Just that it is very targeted towards the 20X pilots right now.
Absolutely. And certainly what I alluded to in terms of what I like, right, is the vision of what 20X is trying to paint, which reminded me when I started reading, and I should say this, if you've been reading the RFCs, one thing I like that I really want us to start doing even more at GovRAMP is the idea of that summary and motivation. There are some paragraphs at the beginning of the RFC documents that really explain kind of in very, I think, layman's terms, kind of why does this document exist? Why are we doing what we're doing? One of the things that in reading through RFC 17 reminded me of was some of the secure by design initiatives that CISA has underway. And so it kind of took me to that, like, that's a big vision, right? That you're integrating security, continuous authorization, compliance into your engineering design up front so that you're thinking about that. And so when you think about the pilot and being able to do some of these things, you've got to be in a position from a provider to be able to have the capabilities to do that. And so it's why I think as I was reading it, I was thinking, and we've talked about this before, but why it's so important to continue to have avenues for all providers, all sizes, all size of engineering teams to be able to participate. But what 20X is doing is really kind of, to me, very kind of future thinking, while we continue to have a ground game for everybody else.
And Leah, I would absolutely agree with your plain language comment across the board on everything we've seen come out of 20X. It is really aiming in these documents to make it digestible by the common person versus the geek you don't allow on a call like this.
I think I'm the common person in this scenario, David, but I appreciate that. So I'm good with it. All right. Anything else on the open comments? Again, don't take our word for it. We're here to just kind of help give you our take on what we're reviewing, what we're thinking about, how it could impact GovRAMP, but encourage you to log in, take a look if you'd like to participate in comments there, we always want to hear. If you read something, if you see something, you think this is something GovRAMP should do, we want to hear that too.
Absolutely. And, definitely provide feedback to them and us if you like. Yeah. If there's something that you really love, tell them that. If there's something you don't agree with, tell them that. It's important to get your feedback.
Yep. Okay, a couple things on the horizon we've talked about a little bit and that we're continuing to look for. This is in their roadmap and we've linked it directly here too. There's a document that's being worked on that for agency requirements and guidance According to the latest note in GitHub, the FedRAMP board should have met yesterday, September 18th, to review again the agency requirements and guidance. And this is really intended, as I understand it, to be guidance for the government agencies in terms of how to use, right, all of the different FedRAMP authorizations, or reuse, if you will, right, David and Alan. So that'll be interesting to see. I'm looking forward to what that guidance looks like.
I was reading the comments again this afternoon on that one, and you can definitely, the level of transparency in the comments is absolutely awesome.
And relatable.
Exactly. The one comment that I particularly loved was naming is hard when talking about the name of the documentation. And while I was reading that, I was reflecting back on the angst we had when we were naming our latest product, GovRAMP Core, and how many names we went through before we launched. So I can definitely empathize there.
Is hard. And I think the other part of that comment was, and there are a lot of opinions. And yes, there are. Consensus building is a thing.
Yeah,
so looking forward to that. Looking forward to that. That won't be something that I don't anticipate. If I understood correctly, there will be an opportunity for open comments on that. That is really more just agency requirements and guidance that would be published by the FedRAMP board itself. So that's something we'll be watching for. The other thing, and this is something we've talked about a few times, and that is the FIPS update. So David, I don't know if you have any comments here. Hoping we'll see more in October, I think.
Yeah. I think this one isn't even scheduled to really get some traction until mid-October, if I recall correctly from the timeline. And
yes, and I think it's been updated where it's also not one that we anticipate for an RFC. It's just going to be now kind of a clarification. Yes, exactly. Yes, it's just published. Yep.
But still, the underlying sentiment of the line item is does the FIPS 140-3 requirement actually apply to service providers, or only those systems within the federal government? Which, as a former service provider myself, I love this mindset.
I know you do. This one also is something, we have this question all the time. So David and Alan, this is, I'm going to toss it to you because I know I personally answer this question pretty regularly. Does the GovRAMP authorization, do those requirements require FIPS validation?
Highly encouraged, not required.
There you go. There you go. So that is something we'll be continuing to watch, but we'll bring to you. Anything else before we shift to a little bit more about what's next to GovRAMP for GovRAMP? Checking the chat. I think we're good.
All right.
Let's talk. So roadmap highlights. This is my plug. If you've not yet registered to attend the GovRAMP Summit, October 2nd and 3rd in Chicago, we're going to invite you to come and attend. And if you're coming to our private sector member meeting, if you're a member, you can join us at our private sector member meeting that Wednesday, October 1st from 3 o'clock to 5 o'clock, that's Chicago time, Central Time, where we will have an in-person meeting. I'm really excited. We did this last year and I loved it. It was so much fun. David and Alan and I will be there along with a few of our other colleagues. We will be walking through just a more full set of some of the things on our policy and program roadmap and have a chance to give a little more detail, invite your comments as well. What we wanted to do today is give you a few highlights that are a little more related to the discussions we've been having. And then keep attending our working group calls, because this is where we'll be able to talk even more about some of the things that are coming down the pike for GovRAMP and our program. Starting a little more, tangibly, what's something that's coming up right away? David, you teased this.
I did.
And that was, if you've participated, we all, but especially David, loves the significant change requirements guidance that has come this year from FedRAMP. And so we were working on our own path for SCRs, saw that guidance and said, hold the phone. We like this better. Right, David and Alan? Am I
Yes.
characterizing that kind of fairly?
I think that the term I made was burn it to the ground, our current
There you go.
draft.
There you go.
And so let's
There you
start
go.
over.
So we started over. And Alan, I want to turn it over to you because we've started over. And then we've also been piloting how to really make this much more automated and a quicker response for all of you. So Alan.
Yeah, thank you both. And yeah, we were working on some big changes. And then, as David said, we were in a meeting one day, and after this came out, and it was just, no, you know what, we need to make this easier, not create more questions and make it more complicated. So we built a new SCR form, as you can see on the screen here, with help and feedback from actually our great 3PAO partners. The form has built-in questions to determine the next steps for a service provider. So once the appropriate options are selected in this form, the form itself will output the next steps to be taken. This way, if the service provider isn't left with ambiguity on who they should reach out to or what they should do or what they should fill out. Also notice in the form towards the bottom, some of the lower questions on there, we have included questions regarding AI specifically. So various changes involving AI are going to be accounted for and given the proper attention. And in the screenshots here, it kind of shows off the slight automation that we've got built into the form of you check one of the boxes on the left if it applies to the change that you're implementing, and down at the box below the next steps box, it spits out a response telling you exactly what you need to do next.
Yeah, and I would add that those AI questions came straight out of our AI task force. So another plug for another group that we have of collaboration going within the community. But these were questions that I heard over and over again and sitting in on those meetings. And so we decided while we were building this form, we were just going to go ahead and jump the gun a little bit from where the AI task force outputs at and go ahead and incorporate that feedback because it was gold.
I love that so much. And I know that this, when we talk about the AI being a part of the SCR, that's different. That is going to be different than what you see in FedRAMP. It's really important for our members. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about our AI security task force next, but I do believe we have some questions. So are you ready? This is coming for Alan and David. What activity triggers the requirement to submit an SCR form?
Well, Kate, thank you for the question. And that is exactly why we built this form. It's historically been difficult for a service provider to even realize if they need to do an SCR, significant change request, or if they need to just notify or just continue doing it as they've been doing it. For example, if it's monthly patching, the guidance has always been just do it. We're going to monitor that through our continuous monitoring function, where we're going to see that you're doing the patching as you should be doing, or we're going to see you're not doing the patching, whichever the case may be. So what we did is we took, those kind of questions about what the change or proposed change is, and as Alan mentioned, automate what the next step response is. So once we publish this form out on our website, which is probably going to be fairly shortly, you can download the form, click the options, and it will tell you exactly what, if you've triggered something that does require an SCR or not, or at least that's our intent. We would, definitely welcome feedback as it gets out into the community so that we know, is it servicing, is it hitting the mark, is it doing what we need it to do to help you guys out?
Yep, I do want to make sure we hit the point as well of what activity triggers even looking at the form in the first place, and that's making any change to your authorization boundary, your information system that you have that your government agency is using.
Okay, good call. Good call.
And it brings us back to follow the data, right? Which is why it was important for our task force, for the AI security task force, to say, hey, we think that triggers it. Because if you've incorporated AI, you have an API now. And when we say AI, we're talking about generative agentic type AI. then the data is impacted. So I think that kind of brings us full circle, David, to your point earlier of follow the data.
Yep. And it looks like we have another question.
We do. So from Chris, how do we deconflict our FedRAMP offering just needing the SCN process and the quote, wait for further instructions hold on the GovRAMP checklist?
Great question, Chris. And we actually developed this form using the guidance from the RFC for significant changes from FedRAMP. What we did is we read through that document, and I put forth a challenge to the team, particularly Alan, that said, how can we operationalize these words and make it more clear? So as we were reading through it, it really became apparent to us that the guidance in there could be transformed into a series of questions that if you check affirmative, as Alan has indicated on the second screen, then we can drive the guidance accordingly. So the guidance that we're providing in the next step, some of those changes that are out there, if it's one that would be an SCN versus an SCR, it will tell you, notify us, continue on. So definitely recommend you come to Chicago so you can see it live.
Yeah.
I just tried to summarize, David, what you were saying there too for other folks.
Great.
Yeah, it's a point I forgot to make, and so thank you, David. Of depending on which checkboxes you select, there are different responses for the next steps below. So there are some responses to your point, Chris, of it might just tell you log the change and continue on with your normal activities. So
yeah,
yes, the live demo would have been beneficial to answer that question there, and that'll be that'll be at the 7th.
All right, you've heard it all here. In the next meeting, Alan's doing a live demo, no more screenshots.
Hey, we said summit, not the next meeting, right?
That is the next meeting.
All right, well, there you go. That works.
Really, really good question. So you wouldn't see all of these, the prompts are going to give you that information. I was just going to suggest too, Chris, as you get into this, if you're seeing this implemented differently, if you're working within FedRAMP and GovRAMP, if you see this implemented differently across the board, we'd like that information too.
Absolutely. The other last point I want to make on this is we recommend that you save a copy of this form whenever you run through it. That way, when you're going through your next annual assessment and your 3PO asks, how did you come to the conclusion? You have it memorialized.
All right. So live demo to come October 1st at our private sector member meeting in Chicago and at the summit. And then we can try to bring this back as well for our next work session in November. Ooh, great question, Kate. Does it generate a PDF?
It's a built-in Excel, so you can do a file save as PDF or whatever other formats Excel could generate for you. If you want to save it natively, you can do that as well.
Okay.
There's also another tab to it that is the full-blown SCR.
All right. Anything else on we've been piloting? I know that we've been piloting this, Alan and David, with a few folks. So if you have more questions, reach out. But I'm excited to see this kind of rolled out live and for the feedback to come. We know your feedback only drives improvement, so don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, I did want to touch on the AI Security Task Force because this certainly is something that's been going on. There will be some implications here, as we mentioned, certainly with the SCR inclusion in that form as a potential trigger. And so the AI Security Task Force, these are just a couple updates, but just for context. First of all, thank you, Chandler. If you look in the chat, you can actually see some links to learn more about the task force. You can also join. This is going to be ongoing, we anticipate, through 2026. So it is not too late to join. We have a number of, I want to say 40 or 50 people who are a part of the task force. We've had a series of meetings, and we really spent the bulk of the summer doing focus groups, having meetings, trying to understand what the concerns or gaps or needs are from our participating government perspective, as well as from industry, and kind of what does it look like? So like I said, when we're talking about AI, I should have dropped in here, we've been really leveraging the NIST AI risk management framework definition of AI. So we're really trying to talk about when Gen AI or agentic AI or similar are a part of a cloud product, what difference does that make from a security perspective, from a risk perspective? And kind of in line with the follow the data, some of the sentiments we've heard that, from a guidance perspective that we will continue to be working on is, helping our participating governments understand or helping them think about what's the data impacted and what's the potential risk, right? And knowing that, and that's where we start, then how do you apply this? The other piece, and this is the first step that we're taking as a task force, is to look at what are the potential implications to our security program. I can tell you throughout the focus groups, I know David and Alan, you've sat in many of them too, in all of our meetings and discussions. One of the big concerns we've heard from our government participants has been, I don't even know what I have. I don't know what cloud technologies I'm already using that have Gen AI that's a part of the solution, because they're constantly rolling new things out, which is cool, except I want to know, right? And that has been kind of the big concern in question. And so we heard that so often, and it's because of that potential data security impact, the potential privacy implications that they want to know. When is Gen AI, agentic AI, and the sort becoming a part of the technology I'm utilizing? And so where we've really tried to drive our conversation is around what can we do to enable trust so that we can really empower the use of this innovation. And so one of the things, and I can tell you at our next task force meeting, which is Tuesday of next week, we will actually have a speaker from NIST who's been working on that same question. Where does security and AI, converge from a NIST perspective? Because ultimately, in talking with our task force, where we'd like to be able to go is to say we have an overlay. When AI is part of a cloud product, then here are either additional questions or controls, or maybe there are parameters that apply. And we're not trying to be onerous. We want to really keep this focused, but to answer that question of how do we build trust, right? What do we need to make sure is in place for security? Okay, but NIST, we want to align with what NIST is doing. NIST, we've been a part of the AI security AI consortium. And so we've been trying to follow that, and we will continue to follow that. What we've come up with as recommendations as a starting point are outlined here. So first, what we're talking about and what we'll be reviewing with our task force next week are some recommendations for, really, it's an AI self-attestation that we'd be asking our providers who are part of our security program, if this cloud product has Gen AI, or maybe it's an API, we're going to ask you to self-report a couple of things that are important to our participating governments. We'd like to note that on the authorized product list and progressing product list for transparency, and then update that in our SCR. So kind of going back to what Alan and David just presented, be able to make sure we're asking about that as well in our SCR process, so that we can continue to have these triggers. So that is an update I wanted you all to hear. It's not too late to be a part of the task force. Our next step, once we've walked through what the draft questions for that self-attestation form would look like, or what it would entail, our next step is to take that back out to the full task force, to anyone who participated in the focus group, to several of our committees that have been participating in our steering, standards, appeals committee members, so that they can, give us their input and feedback. And then we'll just keep whittling away until we get it right. But we wanted you to know this is coming, and to have a little bit of the context as to why. And so our goal all along has been to say, please don't start another AI ramp. Please don't come up with another set of AI security requirements. Rather than that, we should be incorporating it into what we are already doing, because the best security is the best security, right? From a practices standpoint. And so this is our effort to really try to bring everyone together to standardize, to make this hopefully a tool that can help everyone, like I said, just bring that innovation to government faster. So we're really excited about this. And if you have any questions, please let us know. I will say, here's going to be our challenge. It's really easy to add questions to the question. We're like, ooh, and add this, ooh, and ask this. And before you know it, you've got like 200 questions. So we are going to be asking our leadership to, to have it constantly. We're going to say, this is great, now cut it in half, because we want to take incremental steps. We know that the full NIST overlay is coming at some point. And so we're going to try to really take this in an incremental, iterative way. What I miss, David, Alan?
The other theme, and that you have that in the last bullet that we heard over and over again during our AI sessions when we were talking particularly to our participating governments, is they are following NIST. We should too.
Yes, we did hear that. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Now I'm thrilled. I'm at our summit. We will also on day 2, that Friday morning, we have just kind of I'm going to say it's the federal frontier, but it's also emerging technologies and emerging, things conversation. We do have an individual from NIST on that who can speak, during that keynote discussion as well, to kind of what's in the tea leaves, read the tea leaves for us, what's coming. So thank you, Ben. Yes, totally agree. So these are some of the things we've got going. Let's talk. I know we've got a few things more to come. Our priorities. Always good to hear. So we'll talk again a little bit more about this during our full roadmap. And this is where I can say, in talking with David and Alan and Jessica and our leadership, where we really see these working group calls kind of evolving as we go, is to start focusing a little bit more on some of our roadmap initiatives and getting your feedback really early in the process. I can tell you that we talk pretty much daily, I think, David and Alan, on automation being a priority. We came into the year with that as a priority, kind of pushed pause slightly to understand what was happening with 20X, not wanting to diverge. But here's where we continue to kind of land from a leadership standpoint, is that our priority does continue to be how do we lean in, right, from an automation standpoint, while continuing to be a program that is fully accessible, and being able to meet the providers and our community, the small businesses, the medium-sized and the large, where they are. And so as we think about how we go forward, we do have we want to make sure that whatever we continue to build, I've said this before, David, you've heard me say this, we don't want to build something. We don't want to create a new program or a new status or a new form that no one is going to use. We really try to get input from our stakeholders across the board up front. We work with our participating governments. We work with the SMBs, the large cloud service providers as well, the assessors, consultants. We think every voice is really integral to make sure that whatever we are developing, like our new core status, which had many other names at one point, but like our new core status, is something that brings value and is going to be able to be used. So that's not going away. We want to have more input. Framework harmonization is a very critical initiative for us. We believe that we need to all be working together to drive toward greater regulatory and framework harmonization. And so that's hard to do. We want to operationalize it where we can, but we want to be a voice to help encourage that. And so it means that we've got to communicate together. We've got to have common language. We've got to have, to be able to drive toward common accountability, we have to have common language around the standards. And so we want to help continue to be a part of that. I said this before. I think it's going to be I keep saying this. Like when it comes down to what we're trying to do and driving transparency and facilitating greater communication, it's all about trust. It's all about building trust, being a bridge between all of the stakeholders so that we can use these incredible tools and innovation even better. This is the intent and purpose. So that bullet always takes me back to 2020 during our steering committee days, when we were initially thinking about what's the baseline for our requirements. And we were still on NIST 853 Rev 4 at the time, and we were walking through all of the controls and thinking about how to evaluate the controls. And I think it's continues to be about intent and purpose. It's not, did you sign it in black ink or blue ink, right? Did you use a square box or a rectangle? It's about, are you meeting the intent and purpose of the control? And I think that's where we still try to really settle. Understanding again that accessibility point of how are we making sure that we're allowing ways for all the different providers to be able to meet these requirements. Security outcomes being really what it's about. We sure hope we're not creating more compliance checklists for you. We sure hope that what we're doing is helping drive a conversation that allows us to prioritize the security requirements based on security outcomes. And to that end, it's about removing barriers. So when we say we want to hear what works and what doesn't, we need to hear what doesn't work, probably more than we want to hear what does. We want to hear from all of our stakeholders. And here's what I'll say, David, I can relate to that comment that was earlier. There are a lot of opinions. And that's because everyone's coming from a different place. So we want to make sure there's multiple paths in, right?
Absolutely. And I think that relates right back to that first bullet of getting the stakeholder input. And I think that's something that we do better than most in the security realm, of making sure that every constituent we serve has a voice, is able to participate, is encouraged to participate, because some great ideas we've heard have come from those small SMBs and those smaller agencies, and that we're taking a holistic look at things versus just dictating standards.
Yeah. And I think that's how we are able to remove the barriers too, as we learn about them. The barriers to entries that we're enabling multiple paths. It's why we talk about, the fast track paths, whether it's with high trust or for Rev 5, and why we're looking at, while automation's a priority for those who are ready for it, we want to make sure that we are sensitive to the cost or burden that could have on the smaller or those not quite ready for, right, that level of integration, so that we can be here to help people along their journey. So I think this is just, as you're thinking about our roadmap, as you think about where we're going, these are some of kind of the foundational principles. All right, I'm sorry, I'll get off my little, I'll step down now from the podium. But I think what has been really cool about these working sessions is it's really brought so much clarity to these principles for us. Another thing you're going to hear us talk a lot more about is, or maybe a lot more, you've probably heard it already, is, we've been talking about having an initiative to be able to have a fast track into FedRAMP, just the way we've had a fast track from FedRAMP Rev 5 to us. And so one of the things that we are going to be really working on is trying to request formal recognition of FedRAMP equivalency and reciprocity for products that are authorized by GovRAMP. We are really proud of the work that we've done, and think that this would be incredible for our community. We're all part of one big ecosystem, which is why we still try to align where we can with what's happening with that program, but certainly something we're going to talk a lot more about. So if you have interest in being a part of these discussions, if you have interest in finding ways to support this effort, reach out. So that's something that we just wanted to put on your radar too, that you'll start seeing a little bit more frequently. Anything else to add? David, Alan?
What is there to add? You did such a
We've
great
gone
job.
so far. All right, so our next session is going to be Wednesday, November 12th. Please join us. During this time, we will do a lot of what we did before. We're going to say, here are some of the updates that have happened. Here's what we're working on. And we're excited to be joined. We'll spend at least half the time, if not more, with Tony Sauroff, who is with the state of Texas. He has a new role there. He's been the CISO and now is going to be the Chief AI and Innovation Officer, I think. I may have that wrong. So we're going to double check that I had the title correct. We're super excited. Tony also sits on our board. And then Ryan Murray, who is the CISO for the state of Arizona, and just two great leaders and thinkers. And so what we're going to do is invite them to really give their perspectives on what, what matters most to them when they're thinking about all of these changes, where we've been, where we need to go. So looking forward to that conversation. All right, we've hit our time. I talk too much. Thank you for listening. We appreciate all of you. If you have any questions, comments, reach out. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend and hope to see you in Chicago soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.